37th parallel on America's haunted highway. It's Pixelated Paranormal, your guide to the unusual and the strange.
Welcome back to a wonderfully weird episode of Pixelated Paranormal, Season 2, Episode 4, the episode that almost didn't happen but couldn't be stopped. I'm Sean, as per usual, and with me tonight are Preston. Preston, how's it going?
Very good, very good.
Awesome. And Rob, how you doing, Rob?
Oh, man, this has been a mess so far. And make sure you guys can hear me.
It has.
Well, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
We literally,
Loud and
this
clear.
is the third time they've tried to record. The first time, shit went off on my computer. Like, my internet just went out. So I don't know what we're talking about tonight, but the government does not want you to hear about it.
The episode the government doesn't want you to know.
It's all because of the racist aliens, and then Rob's thing with looking up the cat videos, and then they're like, he's probably pro-Clinton, let's fuck this guy over.
We've survived internet outages, earthquakes, and tsunami rain in the last
flood.
3 days. But
Literally, Sean had a manhole cover in his front yard that was projected out of the fucking manhole and into his front yard. Okay, it's not that bad.
It was nuts.
But he did have a 5 foot. Did you say about 5 foot of water just shooting out of your sewer drain?
Yeah, the sewer must have got flooded. The manhole cover shot off, landed in the road, and there was like a 5 foot geyser in the middle of our road. Thankfully, it's been blocked off from construction, so nobody freaking fell into it. But yeah, it was a sight to see. It was a fucking beauty, that's for sure. So. Well, boys, let's not waste any more time while we've got it. Let's jump right into the news, if that's good for everybody. Rob, what do you got for today?
As you know, I've had a lot of dealings and thoughts about the phantom clowns. And it seems like this past week, there's been a new surge of these stories. It started out in South Carolina, where they were kids in this apartment complex were complaining that there was they seen a clown out in the woods, and it was trying to motion them to come to the woods. And you know, they went and told their parents, and they're like, the kids' parents are like, "Oh, you're joking, you know, that's not funny, you know, that's kind of scary." But then, like, another lady said that she's seen a clown walking near the woods. They also said that the clowns were trying to coax the kids into the woods.
Right.
And so it scared people enough that actually put out a pamphlet in the apartment complex, and the kids telling kids to stay away. They don't know what town is. I'm trying to figure out what's so weird is this was in South Carolina, and then 200 miles north, like 3 days later, they had it in
right.
North Carolina had an incident, and they both sounded extremely similar. Like if you'd have told me one, I would have said, "Oh, that's the one that happened in South Carolina." You're like, "No, this just happened in North Carolina." That's how similar they were. Again, apartment complex, kids seeing a clown, trying to lure them out into the woods. Some of them were trying to give them money and told them there'd be food. The kids didn't go, but the kids all kept. I don't know which. I'm trying to figure out which one it is, but one of them, they said that the kids said that there was an old house out in the woods, and that's where the clans were. The clans were staying. The clown.
It's funny that you said clans, because when Sean and I were talking earlier about this, I said that this is very reminiscent of like some type of like cult, so like multiple clowns, or like a really shitty, you know, Stephen King's It.
Some of the kids are reporting that there's an old house out in the woods. The police went out to investigate the house. They found no signs of anybody out there or anything. Both stories also kids seen it first, seen the clowns. They were trying to be lured into a woods, both exact same stories. Also, both stories, another woman seen the clowns. So, I don't know. Is this just mass hysteria? Or is this, is it, one place hearing about it and then just that spreading? Because, I mean, these phantom clown waves happen, these flaps, I guess you would call them. And apparently there was one earlier this year in Green Bay, Wisconsin, just a few weeks ago. They seen the same kind of thing.
Right.
So I said they seen a clown carrying some black balloons, but that to me sounds like that was probably one of those weird stories that you hear where somebody's walking around the city as a clown trying to scare people. But, that's all fine and dandy. That's kind of funny and humorous. But when you're trying to lure kids into the forest, if that's a joke, that's not a very funny one. And somebody's going to get shot.
Yeah. That's pretty fucked.
So this is what I got. So either A, we're dealing with a crazy group of clown cultists, or B, a really shitty Stephen King's It.
Actually, Stephen King said that he came out today and also said that these stories are creeping him out.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the Stephen King stuff, both of you. A lot of people were thinking maybe this was some kind of viral marketing campaign for the remake of it coming out next year. And the production studio has come back and says, no, it has nothing to do with that at all. They are not behind it. And another source said a lot of people were thinking there was a horror movie, indie horror movie being filmed nearby. And they thought maybe it was a viral marketing campaign from them. And apparently it's not. Neither company are involved at all in this.
It's probably for the best that they're not involved, because that would be a terrible, terrible incident. But yeah, it's weird that they're North and South Carolina, 200 miles apart, all within the same week, same type of story. I don't know what's going on, but it's just another phantom clown flap, and they're out there. We don't know what they are. If it's mass hysteria, dogs and cats living together.
Apparently, I just found an update. It says a North Carolina man was arrested for lying about a clown sighting. David Wayne Armstrong, 24 years old, is seen after he was landed in jail for filing a false report with police in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It says here that he told them that he heard a clown knocking on his window one evening.
Oh, okay. This is, I don't know if... I just read that is the city that had the clown sighting, so I don't know if this guy... go ahead, finish your story. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Yeah, that was Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and also Greensboro, South Carolina was the other town. It says that he described to Winston-Salem police how he had chased down a clown in the nearby woods, but the authorities said in the statement that he had lied. He was arrested on a charge for filing a false police report. They found no evidence to substantiate a report earlier in the week of a clown attempting to lure children in the woods yet, but they're still on high alert about that. So it sounds like everybody's involved.
This guy was just probably trying to stir shit up, and he's, but these kids sound like their stories could be legit, but it's... They said money and candy and food and everything else, so who knows? Somebody else said they thought... Go ahead. And also... The one thing that I did notice about the one, I watched a video of the South Carolina one, I think, the first one, and it seemed like to be in a very ghetto area where this apartment complex is. They only showed and I hate to say it like this, but it looked like it was all mostly African American children and stuff in the apartment complex. So and they all looked like they were kind of poor.
Lower income?
Yeah, lower income. So I'm guessing maybe it's a ghetto. So if it's some kind of child molestation thing or something like that, they're really, that's the market that, gets hit a lot of times because they don't have a whole lot of things and they're offering them candy and money. That's scary. So, I mean, but it did look like a lot of lower income people lived out there in South Carolina. So.
Well, from clowns, we're gonna go to Bigfoots. Apparently, a UFO enthusiast says he's captured new footage that proves the ape-like beast exists, and it's also now in the UK. A film clip submitted by Jason Parsons, 40 years old, shows a large figure shaking a tree in the woods of the Caerphilly Mountain near Cardiff in the UK. I nailed it. It says, but Jason from Cardiff was unaware of just how close he was to the alleged Bigfoot until he got home and watched the footage. He told the Daily Star, to my astonishment, I saw what can only be described as a gorilla-like figure, slightly blended in the dark bush, but still having a clear form, just like a gorilla or a Bigfoot creature might have. Jason said that he previously stumbled across a number of wooden X-shaped structures he believes were left by the beast and went hunting for more clues. When he hiked up the trail, he found some oddly broken twigs before accidentally capturing the creature on footage. He said he believes that it is the first time anyone in the UK has caught footage or even a sight of an actual Bigfoot over the pond. The footage is believed to have caused a panic among some living in the rural communities near the place the beast was sighted. Maybe Bigfoot's doing a little vacation.
I was going to say it's like the sequel to Harry and the Hendersons, the UK edition.
Harry and the Fish and Chips.
That was a terrible joke.
As promised, guys, we told you we were going to do an episode about UFOs and aliens and such and so on. So we were going to each kind of take a stab at some different topics that relate to UFOs and aliens. And also, I've got we've got a pretty good listener story submitted to us. So we're going to play that for you guys at the end of the show so everybody can hear that. It's a pretty good one, so we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, Preston, you've got some more interesting stuff from our buddy Mr. Preston Nichols that we're going to jump into, so if you take it over.
So he wrote another book with Peter Moon called Encounter in the Pleiades. This book is the incredible story of a man who found himself taken to the Pleiades, where he was examined and instructed by intelligent life forms who appeared human, a.k.a. the Palladians.
Now, let's pause real quick right there, and let's tell the listeners how many different types of supposed aliens there are.
Oh, man, there's
a lot, right?
Yeah, there's so many that it's unbelievable. So we're going to kind of jump ahead in the story, but so in this book, he talks about how, like, each planet out there in this known galaxy or universe right now that can support life, that life is based on, like, our type of life, is based on the primary millennial. What did I say?
Millennial?
No. Like mammalian, manimal. Yeah, life that's the predominant life that's on there. So in our case on Earth, because boom. So like here on Earth, because the primary mammals that were dominant at the time were monkeys. That are intelligent life. That's that we're upright. We have very ape-like appearance. Whereas like if you look at the reptilians, because the predominant life on that planet that was evolved or advanced at that time was reptilian-like. That's why they're like reptilian humanoids. So basically, whatever given planet it is, your humanoid-like species, it's all based on your predominant mammalian life there. So you can have dogmen, you can have dragonmen, you can have like fucking ape men like us, you can have insectoids, you can have the supposed praying mantis people. So there's all sorts of different types of life out there, and they're all based on some type of mixture of like animal structure.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because in popular culture, we always know about the Greys, which are your typical, big oval-shaped head, almond eyes, slit for a mouth, spindly bodies, usually ranging right around the height of like 3 to 4 foot tall, right?
Yes, and we're gonna get to them. Don't worry, they're mentioned in this book. They play a predominant role in life here on Earth.
There you go. So we've got the Greys, and that's what a lot of people claim to be abducted by, and they're supposedly the grunts of the alien hierarchy. You've got a lot of stories of then moving on to what they call the insectoids, which would be like mantis people or ant-like creatures. We can move on to the reptilians that supposedly inhabit the center of the Earth in a lot of cases, and then Palladians, tall Nordic people, and so many others. So there you go. There's a little backstory.
So Palladians, just imagine like ABBA.
The Dancing Queen?
Dancing Queen! Like blonde hair, blue eyes, yeah.
There you go.
Those are Palladians, okay?
Body be banging.
Yeah. Okay, so basically this book starts off, and it gives us kind of like a back history of ufology. And I thought that this was really kind of clever. He states that since like 1936, so about the time that Roswell started happening, that the rate of about 1 to every 3 to 4 months there's a sighting of UFOs. So ever since like 1936 Roswell, let's just average 3 to 4 sightings per month. Okay.
Okay.
And he said that back in the day, they weren't called UFO. They were called flying unknowns. But he couldn't understand why the abbreviation FU didn't stick. And yeah, that's how this book started off. Now, the earliest encounters that he had with UFOs started started in 1961 to 1962. And it was outside of their family home, so he woke up one night, walked outside, and there was like a fucking, pyramidal-shaped UFO sitting in front of their house, and his mom's like, "Junior, did you see that UFO?" And he's like, "Yes, Mom." The next time he sees the UFO, he's in college now, and so he's outside in this like the Suffolk County Community College. There was a giant UFO flying over the football field, and like supposedly millions of students saw this UFO, but I couldn't find any news articles to support that, so who knows. Now, like during this the 70s, 74 to 75, BMJ was this kind of created defense contract that he was working for at the time. And he was told that they were going to look at foreign aircraft. So he was like one out of an 8-man crew that was supposed to look at this downed aircraft. And so he walks into this hangar, and he sees this giant fucking UFO sitting in there. And he turns to the guard and goes, "Wait a minute, that's a UFO!" And so the guard goes, "Shh, we're not supposed to talk about things like that. That's a foreign aircraft, silly." Now, the interesting thing about this UFO is it was your typical not dick.
Well, sometimes, I mean, come on now. There are some dick-shaped
Wait,
crafts as well.
back up.
Yeah. So it was about 50 feet in diameter, so it was kind of a large metallic disc, it's kind of silvery. 50 feet in diameter, 20 feet in height, and the dome on top of it was about 15 feet wide. Now, this whole craft stood on like 3 little legs that came out of the bottom, and when they went on the inside, now here's the most interesting thing about this story. When they went on the inside of the craft, he said that it's like they stepped into the Death Star. Like there were millions of stories inside this craft where he could like go up, go down, like you could hold like millions of people in this small ship, because what he found out later in the investigation was that the inside of the craft created an artificial reality that was boundless. So even though we had a 50-foot, UFO on the outside, on the inside, this was like the size of the Death Star. It could hold like a battalion of troops or whatever it was. Yeah, pretty much.
It's a dick-shaped TARDIS.
Yeah, the dick-shaped TARDIS. And when they got to the control room...
Wait, hang on, pause. It's a Tardic, right? The Tardics?
Yes,
Go on.
The Tardic. So when they got to the control room of the Tardic, there were 3 chairs. And if you remember later or earlier when we talked about the Montauk Chronicles, the Montauk chair, basically there were like 3 Montauk chairs in there. And in front of the chairs were view screens. And whoever was controlling the craft could sit in this chair, and when they would look at the view screens, it would give them a 360 view of what was outside of the craft. So they could, look and see what was going on all the way outside the craft. They could pull up star charts. They could do all this thing, all with the power of their imagination, or just their mind. And the whole engine, everything that this craft was evolved around, was magnetic fields. So in the bottom of this the spacecraft was a compartment of like crystals, and what it would do is it would create this magnetic field around the spacecraft, which would create this bubble, kind of like in the Montauk Chronicles. and it's what he calls a spinner or a tornado, because the energy field would collapse on itself and make like this spinning vortex. It would punch a hole into the fourth dimension, and in the fourth dimension, the light rays are broken down individually. And since we can't travel faster than light, we can get on side of one of these little slower light rays, like, blue light or, violet rays, and we can travel along it, and then when we punch back into this reality, we've gone millions and millions and millions of miles, and so that's how this craft works. And when we see UFOs that are like doing these weird maneuvers, and like all of a sudden they're going like 300 miles an hour and they stop in midair and then go the other direction, how that's possible is the fact that there's this space bubble, time bubble around this craft. And so the first part of the book basically is just describing how these spaceships works, and I just thought it was interesting because he's just like, it creates its own artificial reality. You walk inside, and it's like the fucking Death Star, or the TARDIS.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, the Palladians first came to Preston in a dream, and he perceived them as a tall, blue-eyed god. And this Palladian told Preston about the Zetas, which are the Greys, who do medical examinations that intrude into the body. However, the Palladians don't like to intrude, but like to teach. And so when they abduct us, they're trying to teach us and, enable us and make us better and blah, 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 blah. So around age 15, they transported him to their planet for rehabilitation and further education. Basically, he was kind of sick and gangly, had a bunch of like breathing problems, and so when they took him there, they fixed him all up and made him like a better Preston Nichols. Okay? So their world was a lush green and beautiful world called, wait for it, Alderaan. Does that sound familiar? Oh. So their cities had tall spires and buildings made of what appeared to be glass. And he said the most interesting thing about the buildings is he couldn't see the seams. He couldn't tell like where the construction points were or anything. It's just like they were just kind of melded into the landscape. The atmosphere is richer than ours and has a oxygen content of about 30%. But the primary difference between Earth and Alderaan is the construction and the landscaping. Where we have cities full of roads, their planet is dominated by fauna, and they're instead of having highways, they have cars that travel in the air, and so it's all about getting back to Mother Nature in Alderaan. The Palladians look just like us, so he said that the way when he got there, it wasn't like too like freakish for him because it looked like a city, it operated like a city, he could see people going to jobs and things like that. So for the most part, they're just like us. They live longer than we do. 700 Earth years to their basically what they perceive as 100 years on their time. We perceive as 700 Earth years. Yeah. So if you think about go back to the stories of the Bible. Yeah. They talk about all those people back in the Bible living like 900 years, 700 years. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, and in their star system, they have 6 planets, and there are a couple different what they have like systems inside those planets. So Alderaan is the technical center. You have Aldebaran, which is the defense center, and then you have Alderan, which is the religious center. Now Aldebaran, they caused all the deaths of the Jews, according to Preston Nichols, in World War II. Now, this will make more sense here in a minute, but basically what happened was they were trying to preserve the Aryan race, which comes from the Pleiades, and they were worried about the reptilians who created the Jewish race. So they went down to Hitler and they said, listen, you got to preserve all this. And then basically Hitler just went apeshit and misunderstood what the Pleiadians were trying to tell him and killed Jews instead.
Ew.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now, the other 3 planets that are in this system, they make up the High Council, and that basically they're a bunch of energy beings that live on these planets. So they're life forms, but not life forms as we think of them. And according to what the Palladians told Preston, he learned that their civilization goes back into antiquity over 100,000 Earth years. and it originates from what they refer to as the old universe. So basically, their universe got fucked up. They punched a hole through time and space into another dimension and came on through to our galaxy, and started seeding life throughout our universe now. Their universe was something akin to Star Wars, and
Couldn't tell.
Couldn't tell. So when we have like people like George Lucas or all these people who are writing Star Wars books, or like Star Trek, those are all memories coming over from the old universe. And since all of our souls are connected from this universe to that universe, whenever we reincarnate from past lives and things like that, we carry over these memories, and that's coming through in our novels and movies and things like that.
In a galaxy far, far away.
Basically, Star Wars is real. Star Wars is real. Okay. In a galaxy far, in the old universe, mind you, in the old universe. And so basically, when they came over to our universe, the Aryan race, they basically seeded the Aryan race here on Earth. Now he goes on to say that after the Palladians, messed around with the genetics, all these other races were like, "Fuck, we can do this too." So the Greys, or the insectoids, they came in and they were like, "Fuck, we can do this." So they created the Orientals, which, mind you, slant eyes and worker bee mentality.
Oh my god.
The Abenaki or the Anunnaki
What's a Nubian?
took the Nubians, which was the original black race here on Earth, and I don't know, and created the modern day black race that we have now. The reptilians created the Jews, and the Andromedans created Native Americans, and if you interbreed any one of those races, you'll get Hindus, or the brown race. And he stated in his book that abductions mostly are done by our government and are planted as false memories as far as like alien abductions goes. But that's it. Boom. Book is over with.
Man. Well, there you have it.
Racist aliens.
Racist aliens.
That stuff sounded interesting, and then it got weird.
Wow, what the fuck? Well,
yes. Now, he wants to mind everybody that he is not racist himself. and his views are not meant to offend anybody. Those are just what the Palladians told him and taught him as far as the history of our universe that goes.
So he learned how to be racist from the Palladians.
Yeah, pretty much.
Fantastic. Well, I don't even know how to segue into the next topic, but I guess we'll bring things back to a more terrestrial level, back on Earth.
Drive right into it, baby. Drive right into it.
Drive right into it. And focus on something that happened in Kentucky. Rob, you want to jump into that?
Right. So I'm going to paint you a little picture here. January 7th, 1948. So this is after World War II, and I guess even after Roswell, because Roswell was 47, am I right? Captain Thomas F. Mantell of the Kentucky Air National Guard was involved in something that led to his death. So he was piloting a F-51 on that day, soaring to Standiford Air Force Base in Kentucky. He was accompanied by 3 other guard planes, and about 1:30 in the afternoon, Kentucky State Police began receiving reports that some worried citizens are spotting a large circular object flying over the city of Mansfield. In a matter of minutes, the area of the sighting expanded to over Irvington and Owensboro. Now, I live 30 minutes from Owensboro, and there's a lot of little communities around here, so I don't know if I've ever heard of Mansfield or Irvington. But this story actually came to our attention because of the 37th Parallel book that they talked about on Mysterious Universe, and they specifically called this story out, and I've never heard of it. And you'd think I'd heard about this. So they said the large metallic craft was clearly seen from the tower of Godman Air Force Base. The object was described as extremely large, round, whitish in color, with a red light towards its bottom side, and seemed to be moving slowly towards the south. So, a little over an hour after the first reports, Mantell's group was asked to investigate the anomalous object. And this was the actual transcript. It read, Godman Tower calling the flight of 4 ships northbound over Godman Field. Do you read? Over. And there was a pause, and Godman Tower called calling the 4 flights of the ships again. Do you read? Over. Roger, Godman Tower. This is National Guard 869. Womp womp. flight leader of the formation, over. He says, and the guard tower reported, we have an object out south of Godman's here that we are unable to identify, and we would love to know if you guys have gas enough. If you want, you could take a look at it for us, if you will. Roger, I have the gas, and I will take a look. So this led to him and his 3 companions received permission to continue their pre-assigned flight plan, and while Mantell and the remaining 2 planes headed the coordinates of the visual sighting. So Mantell led the way in the climb to 15,000 feet, and upon reaching the position, he radioed the following statement: "The object is directly above and ahead of and below. The object is directly ahead of and above me, moving at about half my speed. It appears to be a metallic object, possibly reflecting of the sun's reflection of a sun from a metallic object, and it has tremendous size. It's still climbing and trying to close in for a better look." So he followed this thing, 18,000 feet, 20,000 feet, 22,000 feet. That's really high for World War II fighters without oxygen. The other 2 planes turned back and left him alone to go do this. And he was bound and determined to catch whatever this thing was.
Right.
Now, if it's moving half your speed, you'd think you'd be able to catch this thing in no time flat if you could see it, and it's huge. So he says he said by all accounts, they said he passed out at 30,000 feet, and at least his plane leveled off at that height. So he's going up, and he gets to 30,000 feet, and they're thinking he passes out. So his plane levels out, and then it starts plunging back towards Earth. And he crashed a few moments later on a farm of William J. Phillips near Franklin, Kentucky. They said his watch stopped at 3:16 p.m., and his body was still trapped in the plane. He had spent 45 minutes in a frantic flight into the realm of the unknown. And the giant craft was not visible from Godman's, but reports continued in as the UFO continued southward to Nashville. So they couldn't see it anymore, but he was still after it. And then the story kind of started catching some steam, and it got reported in the New York Times. Flyer dies chasing a flying saucer. Another story was plane explodes over Kentucky as that and near states report strange object. So apparently they thought he passed out and that was just it. His plane crashed. However, they did have somebody report, an eyewitness named Glenn Mays, who lived near Franklin, he said about halfway down there was a terrific explosion. So he says about halfway down, before he even hit the ground, the plane exploded. And there was also testimony of Godman's base commander, who stated to reporters that he observed the craft for almost an hour through binoculars. He would not have confused what he saw for Venus. So basically, it came out that the story was that he was chasing Venus. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think Venus is that huge in the sky. Yeah. I mean, I've seen Venus in the sky. It does not look anything huge like that. But
no, it's not.
He says Operations Illinois made several profound statements regarding the crash. He monitored the radio talk between Mantell and Godman's tower, and he heard this statement very clearly. "My God, I see people in this thing." Now that's what a Richard T. Miller said, who was the operations room of St. Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. So, anyway, that evening, they come to get the plane, and apparently they have photographs of the plane and everything. It looks like it fucking exploded. It doesn't look like, but again, if it crashed, it's hard to say what happened. He said shortly after the crash, Dussler visited the site and made these observations. The wings and tail section had broken off on impact with the ground and were a short distance from the plane, he recalled. There was no damage to the surrounding trees, and it was obvious that there had been no forward or sideways motion when the plane had came down. It just appeared to have belly flopped into the clearing. There was very little damage to the fuselage, which was in one piece, and no sign of blood whatsoever in the cockpit. There was no scratching on the body of the fuselage to indicate forward movement. So it doesn't really sound like it exploded, but if you look at the picture, it looks like that would have exploded when it hit the ground. So I don't know. So anyway, I guess the Air Force got embarrassed about the Venus story because it made them look kind of stupid, So government's pointing it was Venus. So they said apparently there was a air balloon called he said the worldly explanation. The object observed that day, after discovering that naval research was sending up enormous skyhook balloons, the Air Force had their alternative solution.
Uranus.
The theory was also soon aborted after discovering no balloon was launched or could have been seen in the skies. So they don't know what happened to this man, and it just crashed his plane. And there's, like I said, there's theories that it exploded. There's theories that he passed out. Honestly, I don't know what he was chasing, but to me, I think the passing out and the plane crashing seems pretty possible to me because he's, if he really got 30,000 feet and he's reporting this to the tower. But also, I mean, did the plane explode? Did it not? Some guy says he's seen it explode, but, what did he see? But what's really interesting is they talk about, it does kind of sound a little bit like a weather balloon to me as well, but like a large one, because it's like, it's a big whitish, giving off reflection. There's a little red light at the bottom of it. I don't know. But I don't know, man. What do you guys think?
I was going to say, weather balloons are like the number one scapegoats for, it's not a UFO, it's a weather balloon. I don't know. I'm tired of hearing weather balloons as a plausible explanation all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I was waiting for you to say, and then the Air Force came back and said, oh, guys, it was just swamp gas. Classic case of swamp gas.
It was swamp gas from Uranus. He thought it was Venus, but it was Uranus.
See, and what gets me is they say it was Venus, but he makes that classic comment that I've heard. I heard the story a long time ago. Now that you said all that, he says, I see people in this thing.
Right.
That's not going to be Venus. I mean, Venus in the sky is going to be way too small to notice people waving or standing, in windows,
Right, so it's weird. I've never heard that story, and I don't. I mean, it takes place near Owensboro, but it sounds like the actual plane crash happened in Franklin, and I'm not sure. Well, I could look that up, but Franklin, Kentucky is right almost on the border of Nashville.
If you learn more about it, we should touch on it again later. That'd be pretty cool to do some more research on it.
Edge of Kentucky near Indiana. So it's about an hour and 27-minute drive.
So what you're trying to say is we should make a trip. We'll do some crowdfunding and we'll take a little trip.
But that's all I got really about the story. I definitely want to see some more information on that. Well, I mean, we've got the Roswell and we've got our alien attack and
yeah, no kidding. That's pretty awesome though, man, for something of that magnitude to be kind of like Kentucky's Roswell in a way. I mean, there's no bodies found, but
the Kentucky Kelly Goblins, which was in Hopkinsville. Kelly, Kentucky. I wonder how far that is.
Yeah, you get your goblins.
Maybe they shot it down.
Maybe they could have, man. Maybe the aliens are the ones that inhabited that cave.
Hey, where did the Bigfoot Amish manslaughter attack happen? Was that in Kentucky as well? Where was that at?
I don't know. Never heard of that.
Oh, you never heard of that story? Like where this Amish farm, the one night they woke up to the sound. There's basically like a horde of Bigfoots outside the farm, so the Amish got out their shotguns and went to battle and was like, BAM! Blowing Bigfoots apart.
Well, I never heard of that.
I just thought it was somewhere close because they mentioned it with the Kentucky Goblins, so I didn't know if it was close to that or not, or they were just I couldn't remember.
I feel like next time we should have a Kentucky only episode where we just talk about Kentucky stuff.
Yeah.
All Kentucky, all the time. Well, I'll go ahead and jump into my story. My story takes place in the great old US of A as well, up in Massachusetts. Have you guys ever heard of the Reed Family Abduction?
Nope.
This is pretty cool, and it's something it's kind of a theme for tonight's episode of, hey, that's kind of cool. I'm going to look up that more later. I'm going to look into this more later because I've only got a couple of the classic scenarios involved with this case, but I want to kind of delve more into it. This is what they're claiming to be a generational abduction series. So basically, the entire family is claiming that they've had experiences. So when you start talking about that, it begins to get kind of hokey. But the first stories I've got here take place in 1966 in Sheffield, Massachusetts. And it basically centers around two kids, Tom Reed and his brother Matthew Reed. When Tom was about 6 years old in 1966, they were living on a farm. And the farm, I believe, I think the people living there were going to be Tom, Matt's mother, Matt's grandmother, from time to time, his second grandmother, his other grandmother, and I'm going to assume their father, although he's not going to be in the story. He's never listed in the story. But, so they're living on a farm. Tom and Matt shared a room. They had bunk beds in their bedroom. His little brother Matt was on the top bunk. He stayed on the bottom bunk. Okay, that's kind of important. So one evening in 1966, when Tom and his brother were getting ready to go to bed around 9 p.m., they noticed, after their mother left the room, that there was lightning outside, but they couldn't hear any thunder. And a little bit later in the evening, probably about an hour or so into laying down, Tom was almost asleep when he noticed an orb was floating through his room, the classic orb that we see on, the crappy ghost hunter shows and whatnot. And they watched the orb float around the bedroom, he and his brother both. They said it's kind of a low-lit, just ball of light that was kind of going around the room, almost like it was observing them and watching them. And they became a little bit, not quite hypnotized by it, but they were, definitely watching it and kind of enthralled by it. They noticed that the ball of light was kind of giving off a strange energy, almost like you get whenever you're kind of like in a full moon outside. They said they felt like they weren't scared, they weren't anxious, but they were definitely feeling like they wanted to stay awake. They wanted to go outside. They wanted to just kind of, expel some extra energy they had all of a sudden. What they said is they noticed that they were just about to fall asleep when more lightning started outside, but yet again, no thunder. After seeing the lightning outside, the next thing they remember is being outside. And the first experience here is pretty much just from Tom's point of view. Tom says after almost falling asleep after the orb left, after seeing the lightning outside, the next thing they noticed is that Tom remembers standing at the top of their stairs in their house looking down at two beings. And he refers to these things as beings and also E.T.s. So he notices that he sees two beings, your classic grays, 3 foot tall, spindly arms, big heads, big eyes. And he said what was strange about these beings in his house is that they were almost ghostly. He said he could describe it as basically that they were being illuminated by maybe like a 5-watt light bulb, just a very soft glow. He said next he remembers being outside walking down the property line between the property and a field outside towards a boulder that they used to play on. They said there was a boulder just on the outside of their property line that was about 8 feet tall and 5 feet wide. And he remembers, after seeing the two beings inside, walking down single file the property line towards this big boulder. And he said what is strange is he doesn't know what compelled him to walk towards the boulder, but he was in front, followed single file by two grays, his little brother Matt, and then 4 more grays behind them. And he said walking down towards the boulder, he almost felt like he was not really in command of himself, like he was just walking and he wasn't sure why he was walking. He said he remembers looking behind himself over his shoulder a few times towards Matt, trying to find out, if he was okay, to make sure he was still there, make sure that he wasn't being hurt. He said after a certain point, they reached the big boulder and they noticed in the clearing of the trees what they kind of describe as like a turtle shell, a big turtle shell hovering in the clearing. And what he goes on later on to elaborate on is they describe it as a turtle shell because they haven't really seen UFOs or flying saucers before. They just can think of that classic turtle shell. So he looks over and sees a metal turtle shell. And after staring at the turtle shell for a little while, he finally kind of gets loose of this hypnotic state, turns around and realizes his brother and 5 of the grays are nowhere to be seen. It's just him and one other gray. After staring at the gray for a while, he says he gets this feeling of somebody talking to him, telling him it's okay, you can relax, there's nothing to be worried about, there's nothing to be afraid of. As soon as he kind of gives up on being scared, the gray reaches forward and touches himself on the chest, like maybe a communicator like in Star Wars or Star Trek.
Whoa! Oh, on his chest. Okay, he said touching himself. I was really confused.
Yeah, on his chest. So after he touches his own chest, like a little communicator pin, they are then warped onto the UFO. And he says next thing he remembers, standing inside this hallway next to his brother again with 2 more E.T.s. And he said again, they have a strange glow around them, almost like they're kind of being, just their aura is being lit up. And he says what's strange about when he's on the craft, he notices that whenever he gets in contact with any of these grays, they only stand on their left side. They never stand on their right-hand side. It's always by the left. And he said after kind of staring at his brother and not really realizing where he's at, feeling kind of sleepy and kind of out of it, next thing he knows, the gray that is basically kind of being his caretaker leads him down a hallway. And he describes the hallway being very long and narrow, but curved, almost like it's the outskirts of the flying saucer. And he gets to a certain point, and there's finally an opening in the door. And he sees in this opening, there's a kind of a larger room with another gray standing there, basically waiting for them to be handed off to this next gray in this other room. He says he looks over his shoulder one more time, just in time to see his brother disappear around the other curve, led by his other gray, and then he loses sight of him. He said he walks into this other room, and he's handed off to the second gray, and he and that gray are staring at each other, and he said it's weird because he's being communicated to, but it's not really in English, and it's not really by mouth. It's kind of more like telepathic. And he said it's not even really words. It's more like photos and pictures and images, as opposed to actual language. And after he stands there for a few minutes, he says that this alien reaches forward and touches his left shoulder, and then all of a sudden he sees a huge flash. And then he said almost like a plasma screen TV is the only way to describe it. And he said it was very vivid and very odd because back then they just had like black and white TVs. But the pictures that pop up into his head are very clear and very vivid, kind of like a computer screen or a plasma screen. And he said first he remembers seeing the image of like a galaxy just kind of being flashed up. And then next thing you know, that kind of morphs into a giant willow tree. And then after looking at the willow tree for a while, the willow tree is then kind of like in a big lake. And he said they continue to talk about a couple more things. He doesn't really remember what they are. But he said he almost feels like this wasn't really an abduction, like, experiments and different kinds of abuse. He said more or less it felt like it was like an introduction or an induction into something bigger. That's all he remembers. Then he wakes up in his bed the next morning. He said he doesn't have a lot of memories about this the next day, but probably 2 days after it happened, he remembered walking his horse down the property line towards the boulder that he and his brother used to play on. And then all of a sudden, the memory started kind of flooding back to him, like, holy crap, he saw the boulder, he remembered the UFO going on board. But being so little, he was a little bit scared to kind of talk about it, so he didn't really mention too much. And his brother at the time, I think, was like 4 years old, so the two of them never really conversed about what happened. So that was their first experience. The second experience is back on the farm in 1967. He says it's probably almost exactly 1 year after this happened. And then he wants to interject here a little bit and tell you that his mother and his grandmother lived in the house with them, along with himself and his brother, Matt. But during this experience, their other grandmother was staying with them as well, because I guess the second grandmother's sister was very ill, and so the grandmother came to stay with them on the farm while the aunt could get better. So they said, again, it was late at night, and he remembers that he and his brother were getting ready for bed. Their mother was getting them ready for basically to go to bed, and gave them some animal crackers for a snack, kind of get them ready for bed, get their blood sugars back up. He said he and his brother took the animal crackers the mom gave them and went into their bedroom. He grabbed a handful, and then his brother Matt took the box and went on top of the bunk bed. And they were sitting there eating their animal crackers and kind of conversating when they noticed again the familiar sight of more lightning outside. They said that the mother came in the bedroom and commented on the lightning and how she didn't think a storm was going to come because she couldn't hear any thunder, so it shouldn't be anything to worry about. Now, normally they slept with the window open in their bedroom because they had kind of a babbling brook off to the side of the house, and the boys liked to have the window open to hear the babbling brook, so the water would kind of soothe them and make them fall asleep. This night, the mother commented and said, just in case it's going to rain, I want to shut your guys' window. So she shuts the window, tells the boys good night, and they leave the room. Then they say they start seeing the lightning get brighter and brighter and flashing outside the bedroom window. Now, this is what's weird at this point is there's going to be two memories, Tom's memory and Matt's memory. What happens next, Tom remembers being in the middle of a conversation with his brother, on the top bunk, eating the animal crackers. The next thing he knows, mid-conversation, he sees a giant flash of lightning. A bolt enters the room. He hears a pop. And then all of a sudden, he's on a ship, the same ship again, standing in front of a couple of the E.T.s. What his brother remembers is going to be a little more vividly detailed and a little bit different. He said in their bedroom, there was a small closet to the side of their bunk bed. It was kind of like a hatch or like a mini closet. You could open the hatch and go inside and store toys and everything else. Matt says he was on the top bunk and he remembers hearing the rattling of the hinges and the handle of this door being jiggled really hard after the lightning goes into the room. He thinks that Tom is still in there, but Tom's trying to play a prank on him, trying to scare him after the lightning. So after a few minutes, he gets the courage because his brother's not talking anymore. He goes to look for his brother, can't find him anywhere in the room. He's disappeared. This freaks him the hell out. So then he finally runs across the room, opens the bedroom door, and then he looks down the hallway, and again he sees two entities in the house for the second time. So he gets terrified, runs in the bedroom where his mother and his first grandmother are asleep. Two separate beds, by the way. He runs over and tries to wake up the grandma. The grandma isn't stirring at all. He runs over to wake up the mom. Same thing. The mom's just dead asleep. He doesn't give any signs of being aware of what's going on. He gets scared, and two beings walk into the bedroom. He jumps under the covers and starts kicking his mom, trying to wake his mom up. He said he's completely terrified, doesn't know what's going on, why the mom and the grandma aren't responding, when a third entity walks in the room, but this one looks different. He says it's not like the typical Greys. This creature was more of like a teardrop-shaped body, had a big golden egg-shaped head with giant almond-shaped eyes, and then two skinny, spindly arms that bent in the middle, kind of at elbow joints.
Robo Sean's back, so I may be going out.
So the creature at the foot of the bed was blah, blah, blah. Already talked about that. And as I was saying a second ago before I got cut off, it had two skinny, spindly arms that bent at a 45-degree angle at its elbows. And he said it was strange because this creature didn't seem to really care that he was awake and the grandma and the mom were asleep, but instead it seemed like he was kind of surveying the room, taking everything in, kind of watching, and maybe making observations. It finally decides that it's got enough information, he thinks. The two Greys and the third creature leave the bedroom, and as soon as they leave the doorway and disappear, the mom and the grandma both wake up. So he's like, holy crap, blah, 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 blah. Tom's gone. Tom's not anywhere in the house. I think he's gone. So the mom freaks out, runs past Matt into their bedroom, opens the door, looks everywhere, and realizes, holy shit, Tom's not here. At the same exact time, she hears a loud bang, runs back into the hallway, and now Matt has disappeared as well. So we go back onto the ship. Tom says that while he's on the ship in front of the Greys, he's talking to one Grey, but he's not being very compliant. He says that this one's trying to communicate with him, but he's nervous. He's scared because the last time he was here, his brother was with him, and now Matt's gone. So all he keeps thinking is, where's Matt? I'm scared. Where's Matt? What's going on with Matt? Is he okay? He said it's almost like the Grey that's trying to communicate with him is getting frustrated and agitated because he's not cooperating. And so next thing you know, here comes Matt with two more beings behind him, and they basically stand right beside Tom, and they kind of like give him the mental opinion of like, okay, he's here, so shut the hell up. So back on the farm, the mom and the grandma are looking all over the property for the boys, inside, outside. They're walking down the property line. And they say probably about an hour after Matt disappeared, they went back outside to kind of comb the yard again. And at the foot of the driveway, they find Matt just staring off into the distance, kind of catatonic. And then they say they kind of get Matt's attention, and he looks back out in the yard, and they notice about 40 feet away from Matt, there's Tom standing there staring at Matt, again, kind of catatonic and dazed, not really sure what's going on. So they finally got the boys to kind of wake up and shake out of it. They take him inside, they give him some orange juice, wipe their faces down with cold washcloths, and kind of calm them down. But they said the final weird note that they want to let everybody know is that as they're sitting there at the kitchen table drinking the orange juice, they had some they said Coca-Cola tin bottles, like basically toy bottles made out of tin. And as Matthew is standing there or sitting there playing with them, they mentioned that they're acting really weird. They're not just sitting still. They're kind of moving around like they're almost magnetized by the boys' touch. So that was really, really strange. The third experience that happens to them is more of a family affair. It says that Nancy, I assume that's the mom, Marion is the first grandma, Tom and Matt were headed home one evening. I don't have the year. I want to say it was probably the following year. Oh, wait, yeah, 1969, sorry. 1969. The four of them are driving home in the car. It's about 8 o'clock at night. And as they're driving down the country road, the grandma makes a comment that she says, "That's really weird. There's a floating strip mall off in the distance." And the mom and the kids are like, "What the hell are you talking about? A floating strip mall?" And then Tom says, "Yeah, it looked like a long strip mall is the best way to describe it, floating alongside of the car." And then they say that they felt almost like some sort of force, like magnetism, take over the car, a tingly vibration running through their bodies, and then all of a sudden, typical UFO scenario, the lights turn off, the car turns off, and the car coasts on its own for a little while, goes off the road, and then a complete stop. They said Then they had the Oz effect. All the sounds go quiet. There's no crickets, there's no cars, no nothing, just dead silence. They said the barometric pressure kind of changed in the car. It felt like their ears were about to erupt with a deafening silence, and then all of a sudden it sounded like a bunch of katydids and crickets were going off, and then blackness. They said that they were able to piece together a little bit of information. All they can really agree upon is they all remember being kind of like in a metallic room in cages or cylinders and screaming, yelling for each other. They remember different hallways being lost and then basically just yelling out for each other, trying to find out where the other people had gone. Tom says he remembers being in a room on a metal table at some point, and then a new type of being shows up, and he said it was almost like a insect hybrid. He said it had kind of like the body of a man, but the head of an ant, kind of like a long oval-shaped head with big eyes, and kind of like your typical pinchers for the mouth. The arms were thin and spindly with hands that looked kind of like humans, but the legs came down, and they ended up in hooves, not even feet, more like hooves. And the creature did some, poking and prodding. And then the next thing he remembers is waking up on the side of the road. And he said he swears the car was in a different direction. It was basically turned around from where he remembers being. He says that the first person he remembers finding is a grandma. And the grandma is basically just kind of catatonic, walking down the street, disoriented, down the road. So he runs over and kind of shakes her out of her hypnotic state. And she's like, what the hell? Where the hell are we? What just happened? So they get back to the car. The mom who was driving is now basically, again, catatonic in the passenger seat. And then his little brother Matthew is curled up in a fetal position, frozen in the back seat. So, yeah, kind of your classical abduction case. And then they get taken back, but everything's wrong. They're not quite in the same orientation they were, like a half-hearted repositioning. So, what's interesting about this story is that the Great Barrington Historical Society and Museum in Massachusetts actually inducted this case into their historical museum and has it documented as far as being a true story. They said what interests them and convinced them to actually put this publicly in their museum as an actual historical event in the city is that in 1969, there's also dozens of people coming forward saying they saw cylindrical-shaped UFOs in the sky, bright lights, disc-shaped crafts flying through doing acrobatic maneuvers that were not typical of the aircraft in that time. Many eyewitnesses even called the local radio station, making public announcements saying they saw UFOs and strange lights in the skies. The radio station has provided documentation of the actual recordings to the Historical Society, which interviewed one of the eyewitnesses. They've also examined a polygraph test taken by Tom, I think in 2010. And with all the evidence, they said it wasn't a unanimous decision, but it was reached by a voting scale of 9 people that they would actually feel comfortable inducting this into their museum and coming forward, documenting it as an actual historical event. So, I don't know. Have you guys ever heard of that case at all?
I don't think so. It doesn't sound familiar.
I haven't either. And what's interesting to me, too, is, like I said before, they're putting it off as kind of like a generational type abduction scenario. So, as I finished researching a little bit this evening before the show, I found a lot more information I couldn't really jump into, but supposedly both Tom and Matt have children now, and those children have had experiences. There's some stuff to do with the mother and genetics. Maybe the mother had been abducted as well earlier. So I'm going to jump into that and research that some more, maybe touch more on that next time we get together. See if I can find some more information. But yeah, I thought that was a really odd case I'd never heard about. Apparently there's documentaries and also a couple books they've put out about this experience as well. So up next, guys, we've got a listener call about a gentleman who wishes to remain anonymous, but has some pretty interesting UFO sightings that he wanted to share with us. So we're going to jump into that real quick.
Yeah, the very first time I had any kind of experience with any kind of phenomenon that I thought was strange was I have this brother-in-law, and we were out camping with some bunch of other boys, like from a Boy Scout troop, and I was inside my tent and stuff. I didn't really want to go outside, and they said, "Well, come on out here," and it was dark and late, and I'm like, no. And they said, "Well, if we build a fire, will you come out here?" And I thought to myself, well, maybe there's really something out there. If they're going to build a fire and go to all that trouble, I'll go and I'll go out and see. And in the sky, we were like in this real dark area where there wasn't any towns anywhere nearby, just natural light from the stars. And I looked they said, look over there, and I looked to the south, and there was some kind of a light in the sky, and then they said, now look over to the north. And I looked over there, and there was like a light in the sky. And I wasn't sure if they were moving, so I steadied myself against a small sapling tree and watched, and the light did move, but it didn't go away. It just kind of moved. And then it seemed to be, they said those two things are signaling to each other. And sure enough, I looked to the south, and I noticed a blink. I looked to the right and noticed a blink. And they were actually some kind of communication of some kind between the two of them. That was like my first thing. And then later that night, my brother-in-law and one of the other scouts had taken like a trip up to check out some cat cave or something, and they were gone for like 3 hours or more. And when they came back, they're like, so what took you guys so long? They said, what do you mean? We just walked up there and came back. I said, you guys have been gone like 3 hours. And they're like, no, we haven't. And that was my first experience with anybody with missing time. And I don't know if they were abducted or they fell asleep or whatever, but it was really strange, and we all thought it was really strange, talked about it for years. And then the second time, I just bought a new camcorders back in like the mid-90s. First incident happened in the 70s when I was just a 13-year-old. But I bought a camcorder, and I was all proud of it, took it with me wherever I went. And I had a friend, and me.
It was at the time the high definition one. Like, yeah, it was like 90.
Yeah, it was a good one. And I took me and a friend and her kids all went out to the state lake in our nearby town. And I was filming, the kids playing in the water and her talking and everything. And right before I turned it off, I guess I kind of lifted the camera up and was checking or something, and I didn't think nothing of it. And then, I don't know, a couple weeks later, I put it onto a VHS so I could keep it, the memory. And I was playing the video back, see how it turned out, and I had to use the bathroom, so I paused it. And when I came back, I looked, and there was like a bug on the screen, so I went over to flick the bug off the screen of the TV, and there was nothing there. It was in the film, so I played it back. I rewound it again and played through that whole scenario. I never did see nothing. And so I had a 4-head VCR, so I put it on pause, like the slowest it could go. And finally the image appeared, and it only lasted 2 frames, and it was gone. It was going so fast, it was going faster than the speed of sight. And then I was working at my job at this hospital. I was the only one there on second shift, and I walked out the back door to do some of my chores, and I just happened to look up, and there was a craft. I mean, it's clear as day, a craft. It wasn't a plane, it wasn't a jet, and it was just kind of going through the sky. Just it wasn't going real fast. It was like probably going faster than a plane would, but slower than a jet, and it just kind of went across and just right over where I was working, and there was no doubt in my mind what it was. When I seen it, I like, okay. Now, with all these sightings, with all these things I've seen, I've come to realize one thing, that in 48, I think it was June the 6th of 48, when the Roswell incident happened, they did recover some technology, and they did reverse engineer it, and they have created their own crafts. And like I've heard recently the saying that we now have the technology to take E.T. home. This stuff's everywhere. There's, I go to Facebook a lot, or YouTube, and I see different things posted, like third phase of the moon, different sites that post things daily. Back in the day, we had just video cameras. Now everybody's got a cell phone and everybody's got a camera, some are really high definition. And these people are just shooting this stuff to these feeds, and they're sharing what they've seen and stuff. But I don't know. I really don't want to get into any more of it right now, but maybe in the future we could talk. I can say more about what I've seen. But anyway, that's it for now. Thanks.
All right, guys. So what do you think? That's a pretty interesting stuff, I think.
The very first story, I thought that's very reminiscent of what they call like ghost lights, where like you necessarily are not seeing an actual like craft, but there's like that orb or that light in the sky. And we have them here in Kansas, in Joplin, Missouri. They're called the Joplin City Lights, and they're kind of like a reddish tingish kind of orange or reddish brown color. And people say that they see them floating in the sky, and they can't tell exactly how far away they are from each other, but the lights will sit there and blink back and forth, almost like Morse code. Something that we don't recognize, like people try to figure out the code, but it's like they're communicating back and forth. I think that first story that he told is very reminiscent of like maybe like a ghost light, or I don't know, maybe an actual like UFO sighting. But then that whole missing time thing, that's pretty interesting right there.
Yeah, so, that's probably my favorite part of that first story is, you know, the lights are interesting enough that they're kind of blinking back and forth to each other, but then you got these two kids that just, we're gonna run up to this cave real quick, be right back, and then they show back up, assuming that, you know, we've been gone for 20, 30 minutes or whatever, and they're like, where the hell have you been? It's been 3 freaking hours.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah, that's really intense. So, and especially, I mean, to be that young, to be like a, you know, Boy Scout age, you're already a little bit scared and on edge because you're young and you're camping and the noises and the things that you've seen, and then to add to that you're seeing, you know, UFOs or lights in the sky. I mean, it's got to be pretty freaking terrifying to me.
Right.
Oh man. What you got? Anything else to say, Rob? Sorry.
Oh no, that was just
cool.
The missing time is the.
Yeah. What I thought was cool about the second instance with the recording is what I liked the most is the fact that he says that the craft was flying faster than the speed of sight. And I really appreciate that, because that feels to me like a very heartfelt, honest opinion, you know, of what he saw. He's not saying it's faster than the speed of light or anything like that. He just says it's faster than the speed of sight. So it feels very genuine to me of someone that, you know, saw something they can't explain.
Do they still have a copy of that?
You know, I don't know. We'll have to check and see if they still have. Being as long ago as it was on a VHS tape, I don't know. It's a good question. We could check in and see.
Because I was as I was listening, I was thinking like, so you have you know, like you said that's kind of very like genuine response of faster than the speed of sight.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, he had mentioned something about how he thought like he saw a bug on the screen, and then he went to go shoot it off, and it wasn't there. And debunkers of paranormal videos, like people who try to debunk these videos of like flying saucers or whatever, a lot of times when they slow it down enough and you have enough frames, they'll actually show like a little, it looks like almost like a fly or a gnat because of that bug, the way that it's flying. You know, its wings are going so fast that when the camera tries to pick it up, it makes it faster than when it's really going. So, you know, you have basically two cases here. Either A, he really did capture a flying saucer on video, or B, you know, there was a tiny bug that was so close that's what he captured. So it'd kind of be interesting to be able to see that and see kind of, you know, does it actually look like a flying saucer or not?
Right. Yeah, we can check and see if they still had the video. If they do, that'd be fantastic to see.
I bet they don't. I mean, sounds like it was a lot of years ago.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about too. It took place a little while back, so I mean, if they still have it, that'd be great. If not, I would completely understand why, with it being that long ago. So, but you know, the nice little cliffhanger there at the end is that they've got more stuff to share. So maybe we're just kind of breaking the. What do you say? We're just kind of breaking the ice there. So
we haven't even got to the meat and potatoes yet.
Yeah, there could be some even better stuff in there, but I mean that's pretty crazy, man. Especially that missing time bit there was just really, that's odd and scary as hell, I think.
Now that do you know if that camping story, that first one with the missing time, was that kind of in our typical area?
You know, I don't know. We'd have to find that out too if we can as well, and find out, because it could have been here in Kansas. It could have been, you know, somewhere on the east or west coast.
I don't think don't think he was from Kansas though originally, so I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. And, it could have been close to some state parks, maybe even. With Boy Scouts, they tend to stick straight to, close to well-known areas. So that'd be even more interesting to kind of link to the whole missing 411 type stuff. So, yeah, that's a pretty good call. We really, really appreciate that, sharing that with us. And we hope that we can get some more information later. We'd love to talk more and get some more stories. If you've got them, we'd love to hear them. So, well, guys, do you got anything else for tonight's episode? I know we, on a wing and a prayer, we barely got here. So,
yeah, I almost feel like we should just end it now because I'm afraid to death we're going to lose everything.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Okay, cool. Well, Preston, you got anything to plug? Anything you want to talk about real quick?
No, I mean, we're going to be recording our other podcast this week, and so I'm, excited for that.
Awesome, good deal. I'd like to plug that I just finished season 2 of Penny Dreadful. If anybody's big into kind of gothic horror, classic monster kind of horror sagas, Penny Dreadful's on Netflix, seasons 1 and 2, and it was a pretty good show. We really enjoyed it, so it's always good stuff. Rob, what do you got? What do you got plugs?
And also, hold on, we also got the Pixelated Radio Podcast and Pixelated Sausage Cast with Mark as well on our radio network. So that's what we do. So, and Sports Car Unleashed with Rich. And also shout out to Hotcakes Man for coming by, and he Twitch streams as well, but he's also came by and hung out with us when we played D&D. So 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, there we go. Hell yeah. Hey, and also a podcast, we've got Oh Indeed coming back to the masses. Our good friend Steven has got his podcast once again coming out called Oh Indeed. It'll be video game, pop culture, music, I'm sure, and many, many much more. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I think they're getting ready to hit iTunes pretty quick.
And Steven is also on the podcast with the Dragons and Dungeons.
Yes. Most definitely. Okay, cool. Well, if that's it, guys, another hearty thank you for that listener story. We really appreciate that. We look forward to more, and just catch us next time around, guys. Thank you so much.
The cast at Pixelated Paranormal would like to thank you for listening to this week's episode. Pixelated Paranormal is here to tell you tales of the fantastical, the strange, the unknown. Tales that will move you a little further down the paranormal highway. If you'd like to share your own listener story, we would love to hear it. You have 2 ways. 1, email us at pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. Again, that's pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, we have that set up too. Dial us at 707-523-4263. Again, that's 707-523-4263. We'd really love to hear from you. Again, thanks for listening to this week's episode of Pixelated Paranormal, your guide to the unusual and the strange. Primary millennial, what did I say?
Oh, no.
No. Like a mammalian. Manimal.
It's me again, Margaret.